Okay,
All right, are we live?
I think we're live. We have had yet another snafu. Now that's why we're together in the same room. Somehow Jason invited you. You came into the hangout twice.
Yeah, twice.
So then we tried to block one of the Jasons, and it ended up kicking you all of Jasons out.
Well, I blocked myself.
Right.
I blocked one of me,
Yes.
and then you blocked me.
Yeah.
And maybe you blocked the wrong me.
No, there was a message in the hangout. It only gave me one option. It was like, it said, Jason, block Jason. Do you want to block Jason? And I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Whatever. So we're doing it in the same room. So cool. It's a little different.
Yeah. I've never met you before in person.
Good to see
weird.
you. Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good. Yeah, yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to just get into it? Or
Yeah. We were talking at lunch, actually. We went out for lunch together, and we're riffing on some stuff, and we're just like, let's stop talking about that so we can talk about it now instead.
That's right.
So what were you getting into?
Well, so like we've talked about a lot, and I mean, you and I both know, and a lot of people I think know now, it's like Highrise, Highrise spun off of Basecamp about a year ago now, and before that there wasn't a lot of development on it, right? I mean, the last kind of aesthetic refresh of Highrise, I believe, was back in like 2011.
Probably. Yep.
There's stuff that looks a little dated.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd like, Highrise, and it would, so it's good for a bunch of different reasons, like kind of redesigning, kind of just aesthetically, not even like moving stuff around, but just even just focusing on styles and images and icons, buttons and form elements would be nice to kind of refresh that stuff. But it's dangerous. That one of the things that's on my mind, obviously the most, is like a lot of people have been using Highrise for a while, like
right.
Making that change. Like there's things on the table that I guess we could like fool with, like give them the option to like switch into a separate style sheet or something, which is doable, but then it's going to, something like that would make it hard for us then to develop new features if we have to constantly check both styles.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's been 5 years almost since it's been redesigned.
Yeah.
Maybe it might have been longer than that.
Yeah.
Might have been 2010. Is that my thing?
This is insane. I'm sure. I don't. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think you've earned the right to make some changes to the product.
Did I screw up our?
I don't know.
No, it looks like it.
Yeah. So you've earned the right to make changes to the product. I think, and I think if you make a good case as to why it's being updated, like you can make a case. Certainly, some people will always be upset by change. Clearly, and that's fair. It's a fair, I think the thing to keep in mind with customer reactions and feedback is that they're always right in their own mind, and I mean that like in the most positive way. That like if it affects them and they're bugged by it, then it's true. It's real. But if you I should be looking at the camera. If you just are, I think you can't be afraid of your customers, and I feel like it's easy to get that way sometimes. And then I think you might be able to do a transition period at some level, but there's still going to come a point. In transition, I mean like having two style sheets or something. But at some point, you're going to have to pull the Band-Aid off. The Band-Aid will have to be pulled off at some point, which is why I think it's best to pull it off early and not even have a Band-Aid. Like preview it openly, give people a chance to look at it in detail, explain why you're doing it, and say like in 2 months this is going to launch, or in a month, whatever it is. Give people a little bit of a head start so they're used to it and whatever. Preview it clearly, and then make the move. Because if you don't, it's going to slow down development on both sides, which is going to hurt everybody ultimately. Right. It's going to make things a lot more complicated, which is going to slow down development even more in the future. You're still going to have to pull the Band-Aid off at some point, which is still going to upset some people. So I think you just have to make a case and recognize some people aren't going to be happy with it. But hopefully, like most people are, and thinking about it long term, if it's a better product because of this, you're going to have more customers who like it down the road as well. So it's a balancing act, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. No, and that sounds
tiptoe around it forever, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think the thing you can remember is there is going to come a point, unless you run two things concurrently forever, and that means like you'd have three things concurrently at some point, because at some point down the road you might want to do it again.
Right.
that's going to be untenable,
Yeah.
and so you're going to have to pull the band off,
Right.
and like just do it,
Right.
Just do it.
Even in some of the implementation details of it, though, now, like, so, and, you know, that the high level, yes, I agree that all makes sense. Now we're getting into some of the, even just kind of figuring out some of the implementation details. A weird quirk we've got is people can pick a customizable header image. So the top of Highrise, I think the default is a blue. Our own internal Highrise we use with the team, we've gone to black. Those are the two most popular colors. Red, I think, is maybe our third. And then there's some other ones that are like really not like, there's like a mint green and a light blue or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a pink.
Yeah.
Those are going to have to change. Like, you know, like so that's even kind of weird, right? Like, do we try to still support out of the box customization? What do we do with some of the, and if we do or we do not, like, do we try to keep that old color choice, you know, that they've kind of gotten used to, or do we try and kind of change, you know, the mint green, let's go to a different green that goes with it? That one's a weird one, because it's like,
do you allow custom colors? Or is it
no, it's just, it's picked from a palette of like 8 or 9.
Yeah. My feeling would be, my gut would be that if you're going to make a drastic change, if you could give people something to hold on to that's the same between the two things, that might help ease the change. So if you are changing over and there is a big block of color somewhere, keep the color that people had. And then it's like, interface changed, but at least you have the familiar color that you're just used to, and like it's yours, and we didn't take everything away. It was, you know, I think that would help a little bit.
That's
just ease transition a tiny bit.
That's interesting.
That'd be my take. But I don't know what the UI will be. So the UI might not have like an element place where there's color. Maybe the UI is like, it gets out of your way and there's no UI, but just copy and text and whatever. And I don't know. But if there is, I think I would let people bring their colors with them.
Yeah.
Or not even let them bring it, just like they would be there when you transition.
Yeah.
I think the key is, I think what frightens people or upsets people, and I'm one, we're all people, like, is I log in the next day with no warning, and all of a sudden the furniture has been completely rearranged in my house, which is basically what would happen if you redid the UI in Highrise. I don't think you can launch a big major change like that without ample preview time, giving people hints as to what's coming, so they have some expectations. So when they see the new thing, they'll at least know, oh yeah, this is the thing they've been working on, they've been talking about, versus boom, on Monday, everything's changed, and then you try to explain why. Like, there's going to be pent up discontent there just naturally. So I just ease into it as best you can.
Totally.
That's my suggestion.
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, like history, I think we've even talked about in an earlier episode. I mean, I've made this mistake in apps before of like making some drastic changes, even little changes that don't get communicated. The name of a link changes, and you know, people like to see previews of that stuff just to have the heads up. Obviously, this is a big deal, and so yeah, no, we'll totally leak this stuff out.
I would do that.
Yeah.
I would do that. I think that's gonna be the best way to do it. I'm trying to remember when we redesigned Highrise, if we may have had a thing temporarily where you could use the other. I'm not even sure what we did back then, but we may have given you a preview ahead of time. I forget what we did. But we tried to share as much as we could ahead of time. And some people won't pay attention, and then they'll be surprised. But like, what are you gonna do?
Right.
You just do the best you can. But
right.
I think being afraid of that is dangerous. And what we do in Basecamp, we don't do major redesigns of Basecamp unless it's actually a complete rewrite.
Right.
So Basecamp Classic, the original version, when we launched the new version, which is the version that's out today, we didn't change Classic on anybody. We said you can keep using Classic. It's actually a separate product. It's not a separate style sheet. It's a separate flat-out product entirely. And the new version we're going to launch is going to be the same thing. It's a separate product, rewritten from scratch. Nothing is shared. And then if you use today's version, you can still use that for as long as you want. So we're not forcing change on anybody. They can choose to change if they want, or they can use both. They can straddle both forever. But it's not a situation where there's a common code base with two different interfaces. Right. That's where it gets complicated, because then you got to you're building multiple things. Then if you get in the mobile world, like what you guys are, like, what does the mobile app look like? Now, does that reflect which style sheet you selected? It's just complicated.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we've done. I think it's worked pretty well. You have to be committed though too if you do it that way. And I don't think yours would be that, because you wouldn't be changing the product drastically as much as you'd be just freshening it,
Right.
and making it possibly faster and easier to use and easier to understand, which is all beneficial. But it'd be interface level stuff.
Yep.
You know, that would say that would be applied to all existing customers versus all of a sudden the product does 80% of what the old one did, but 50% new stuff too. That's like a different base, different code base, different concept, different product, and that's when you can say you can keep the old one or use the new one, but they're different products.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. I think that's what I'd recommend.
Cool.
Yeah.
And we'll I'm sure I'll show you before we even get into the weeds. I'm sure one of these other calls will talk about what it actually looks like. Maybe we'll get into some implementation details.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to do that too. It's funny, we are. I was telling you before the show. As you get closer and closer to when something's supposed to be finished, this has been my experience. Closer and closer when something's supposed to be finished, you evaluate things in different ways. So if you're a year before something's done, you kind of let some things slide that aren't quite right because you're like, we'll get them right eventually. We'll figure it out eventually. Or like, maybe this will shake its way out or whatever. But as you get really close and you can see launch date, you begin to evaluate things. You know, this is too complicated. We're making this too hard. I didn't care if we made it too hard 8 months ago because we were just exploring. But now, like, we're going to ship something. Now it's too hard. So like, as you approach the deadline, things get very real. And when things get very real, the pace of change speeds up. And this is the experience we had with today's Basecamp as well. We made a lot of last minute big changes actually. And very few people who work here today were around for that. So they haven't had that experience of like sort of the anxiety of the pace of change picking up at the end when you feel like it should be calming down.
Right.
Anyway, so we're still exploring the main project page in Basecamp right now. And like over the past week, David, Ryan, and I have been exploring radically different approaches to it. It feels like it's too late to do that, but it's kind of never too late to get the fundamentals right.
Right.
And these are kind of just things moving around. They're not necessarily new features. It's like this goes here instead of here, or this gets bigger and this gets smaller, or there's a block up here and here versus one big block. There's like, it's mostly placement stuff. There's a few, like an idea we just had about an hour ago is a little bit more complicated than that. But actually, it's simpler in the long run, but like conceptually right now, a little bit more complicated. But anyway, I forget where I was going with this, but where was I going with this?
Well, you're getting nervous about like, can you keep making these changes?
Oh yeah.
Or I think like, when do you stop making these changes and just go with what you got for now? Being that it is a very fundamental part of I mean, right? I mean, this is like you're talking about like stuff that's like right in your face. I mean, this is a very fundamental part of your starting and using and implementing the new version of Basic. This isn't like a link on a settings page or something.
I remember why I brought this up too is because we're talking about showing some screens soon, and like I want to do that, but I kind of don't want to do it right now because I think the idea we had this afternoon could be a much better idea than we have right now, and like. So we're getting close, but soon enough, we'd like to share some screens and walk people through what we're doing and why we've come to the conclusions that we have and what the conceptual model of the product is and why it's different and the whole thing. But like things are rapidly changing so much right now that I want to kind of get it settle in first before we do that. So maybe in a week. I think we had this idea an hour ago. David's hacking something together right now just to kind of test it out, and then we can look at it this afternoon and go better, worse. Promise, no promise. Sometimes the sort of degrees of I'm trying to say the way you evaluate things isn't always like better or worse. Sometimes it can. What I'm finding actually is that what I've been surprised by is that usually my point of view is. Make something as clear as possible, almost at all costs. And what I found is that we explored a much clearer design. But what I've actually found was that it sucked some of the life out of the product. Some of the sort of interestingness, I've been calling it like interestingness. Like, I don't even know how to define it, but it's just a feeling. Like you see something, you're like, that's just kind of quirky and interesting and like flexible in an interesting way and kind of messy, but in a good, interesting way. Versus like when you went to any project in this other design we looked at, like everything looked identical. And it was like a 10,000 foot view and everything looked the same. And it just kind of like, it just sucked the soul out of the thing. Yeah. And so we're kind of exploring this other thing, which like inserts some soul back. And then we kind of got to a point where we're kind of mixing clarity and soul, and it got a little weird. And I think we may have come up to something today that's actually really good. That's both clear and soulful, but conceptually clear and soulful as well. And not just like, well, I understand why this is clear, this is soulful, but like instead, anyway, it's very abstract, but it's fun to feel like you're orbiting a solution. I feel like we're orbiting the right answer, but we haven't landed on it yet, but we're going around it and we're getting closer and closer and closer in. And that's kind of a fun feeling, even though there's anxiety around it because we haven't landed on it yet. Yeah. But I think we're circling it, and I feel good about that. Versus circling the wrong idea way off. Right. I feel like we found the right place. So.
Interesting. I remember, so did the project, going back to BCX, when you guys launched that, the current version of Basecamp, the project, the list of projects, that changed somewhat radically after launch even, didn't it?
It did. So what we had originally was, we had these cards for projects. Each project was a card, and that was the only view I think we had.
I think so, yeah.
And then, I might be wrong about the timing, but we had that view at one point. And then we created a lot of projects, and like, well, this is actually a crappy way to look at a lot of projects. Yeah. So let's let you star some projects, and those will go to the top. And so at least now they're organized. And then we realized that just that alone isn't great because you might star 20, and then you're still in the same boat. And so then we said, starred ones are the only ones that are cards. The rest are list view. And then some people said, well, I don't want to star any of my cards. I just want everything alphabetical. So we kind of came up with 3 views. There's like pure cards for small accounts. Like if you have 4 projects, cards is all you need. If you have 50 projects, there might be 3 or 4 that you're working on all the time that you put at the top. And then if you just want A to Z, because it's just easier for you to find, there's just a list view. So we kind of had these 3 toggles. And it's funny because we pushed against it internally for a while. Like, do you really need 3 different ways to look at stuff?
Right.
And the answer is, yeah, in some cases you do. I mean, like the Finder in the Mac has like multiple ways of looking at things. There's just a point where as an idea matures, you can only be religious about it for so long, saying like there should be one way for you to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why? Like what do you gain from that? Like, so we just kind of set it up and there's 3 ways, and I think it makes sense in nearly every case.
Yeah.
One thing you can't do currently is like reorder the pinned things. You just pin them and they kind of snap in, and that's where they're at. Yeah. Like ideally you should be able to.
Sure. Because I'm curious. I mean, we keep touching on this over these episodes, but like, has there been something in Basecamp, the first version of Basecamp, or the current version of Basecamp, where you felt like you made a radical change post-launch? You know, like with, you know, what was it like? Was there a calendar screen or a to-do list where it was just like, it changed a value for you guys? Like, and I don't know, you know, like, was there something that you introduced that like then upset a lot of people, like that thing is now here, or you removed something and you've heard about it?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, Classic was the first one that because Classic exists, well, it still exists, but like it was the only Basecamp for 8 years. And so we actually had redesigned it 1 or 2 times throughout that period of time.
Okay.
The first version of Basecamp, way back, Classic, was like a centered piece of paper kind of page.
Okay.
It didn't look like paper, but it was like a centered box on a background.
Yeah.
That was the first version of Classic. And then we redesigned it a couple years in, maybe, where like it became the whole screen, where you had like the red bar across or the color bar all the way across the top, and the content, like it was just, it used to be like a blog where it's like a page on a page, and then it just became the page. And that was pretty radical, actually.
Yeah.
And then we added campfires. Like we added a way to integrate Campfire into Basecamp, and we launched Campfire after Basecamp. So we added like another tab. And when we added another tab, which was called Chat at the time, I think, that's when we started to hear from people saying, "I don't want that. Can you turn off the tabs?" And so we started thinking about that, and we didn't actually allow you. I think we allowed you to turn one of them off, but not all of them. It wasn't a complete answer. It was like a piecemeal answer, and that's where you start to get yourself into trouble when things don't logically make sense at a certain point, because then you don't have good answers. Customers like, why can I turn this tab off and not this tab? And the actual answer is just because that's how it works, which is a crappy answer to give somebody, rather than like saying you can actually you can turn them all off, or you can turn them all on, or here's why you can only do this one versus this one, or whatever. But it was just, when you come into these situations where like, well, there's a special case or a hidden rule, that's when things get sort of weird. And I've been sort of pushing it back over the years against hidden rules. We have a number of hidden rules in our products. That's always like a red flag to me. Whenever it sort of works this way sometimes and this way sometimes, like you're in red flag territory that's not easy to explain, and people will never figure out.
Right.
And then it's hard for support to explain it, and it's hard for people to internalize like the rules around it. So I think like things should be predictable at the very least.
Right.
Even if they're predictably weird or not ideal, they're at least predictable, so you can explain the logic around them so someone can understand it.
Yeah.
Versus like, well, sometimes it's like this, but other times it's like that because this is like that, and it's like it's too much.
Yep.
So that was kind of where we introduced that by allowing you to, I think, only hide one tab, or you can turn on the integration and then you got a tab or something like that.
Yeah.
There's some of that. We also introduced Writeboards, which is another thing we introduced into Basecamp, because Basecamp launched in 2004. Writeboards came after that. In BCX, in today's Basecamp, we didn't have a calendar inside projects. We had a global calendar, but not like a calendar view inside projects, which we eventually added. That was a big project. Yeah, I mean, there's things we add that people don't like, and there's things we haven't added that people want, and there's things we've added that people love. It's kind of all over the place.
Has any of the ads though created a reaction from customers where you're like, "Fuck, I wish we didn't do that"?
I'm trying to think. I'm certain that there have been some, probably. Oh, a good example. With today's Basecamp, we call it BCX. Today's Basecamp, I don't remember actually the order of how we did this, but so there's the notion of an account owner. An account owner is the person who signed up for the account and they own the account. The idea was the account owner originally, I think I'm getting this right, originally did not have access. So in Basecamp Classic, the account owner had access to all projects by default. A lot of account owners complain saying, I don't want access to all this stuff. Like it's making my Basecamp messy because I see everything other people are doing and I just don't want to.
Yeah.
So for the new Basecamp, I think we started by saying account owners did not have access to all projects. And then we heard from a lot of people saying, well, I'm paying for the damn thing. Like, I need to know what's being used. I need to know about that.
Yeah.
And then we had a dilemma, because if we then give people, the account owner, access to all projects, and people would set up projects that they didn't think the account owner could see.
Right.
Like, are you violating privacy?
Right.
What happens in that case?
Right.
The call we eventually made was that ultimately it is the account owner's account. It's on their credit card and they bought it.
Yeah.
And they actually have the right to that stuff.
Yep.
So we made that change, which made a lot of people happy and then a lot of people unhappy.
Yeah.
And this is like, it's kind of a minor, it's like not even an interface design change. It's a logic rule change that has deep implications over ownership and privacy and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah. How did you? Because we had the same problem too in Highrise. Like, it's like the Highrise permission system is like anyone in Highrise can make something private and private to a group of people that don't include like the admins or the account owners.
Right.
And when you're talking in the CRM world, there's a lot of account owners who, a guy he quits or she gets fired or whatever, and then it's like, well, what about those things that were private to them? As the person who's been paying for the software, shouldn't I have access to them?
Yeah.
Currently, the answer is sort of no, but like, you can, ask us for special permissions, and I mean, it's weird. It's a weird little
It is weird. It's a complicated one. I think
Because a lot of these account owners, they could just impersonate the user anyway, right? I mean, if you get fired or you quit, they have access to your email. They could just do whatever it takes then to get the password reset and log in as you anyway.
I think the thing that we came to was that if you own the account, you own the account.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's a fair and reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
This is what I come back to with the like, what is it's not convoluted. It's like, it's something you can at least explain clearly.
Right.
Like, you own it. It's your credit card. You're paying for it. Certainly it's yours.
It's probably,
I think it's like just and you can come down on either side of that argument, but it's a reasonable argument that you can wrap your head around and then make a call on versus, well, sometimes they have access if you grant them special permissions on a certain, like, that's when it gets weird. But if you just make a clear line in the sand that like has reason behind it and a fair argument, I think people will appreciate that.
How did you announce that change? Did you send out an email or did you do it kind of quietly? Like what is the like, hey everybody, account owners now have access to all the projects, warning or
I don't think we announced it actually. I don't remember, but I don't think that we announced it. It was more like the assumption was now true, sort of. I don't know though. I mean, it's weird because I don't really remember how we did that.
Yeah.
And if there's a great way to do it, a part of it is that we don't make all announcements to all users in Basecamp. So like announcements can be sent just to account owners or everyone, but not actually everyone because we didn't send them to clients. Clients never saw owners announcements. So like Basecamp announcements. I don't know. I don't remember actually how we rolled that out, but the other thing we've run into is that in Basecamp, we only have the notion of one account owner. And it's weird because actually here, like David and I own the business. David's not an owner of Basecamp. Right. If I died, technically, like he wouldn't be able to take our account. Technically, I mean, like our customer service team would help him.
Right.
But there's situations where owners, like owners have died, or there's been a divorce, or there's been some stuff that goes down. And so what we're doing is in the new version, what we want to do is allow the account owner to make other people owners, and they are now on equal footing with them in case for whatever reason. So it's just like it's kind of in case of emergency sort of things. Anyway, a little bit off topic there, but there are things we've done that don't even have to be visible to anybody that have like deep implications, and those are difficult calls to make, but you kind of have to make them. Yeah.
It's 2:32.
Oh, okay.
Probably you should call it, since even though we went a little started a little late, but
I guess let's call it. Cool. Well, hopefully this will work again next time.
Yes. Yeah. It is surprisingly hard to do a video podcast and get all of these bits right.
Why is it a podcast? We keep calling it video podcast.
We do call it a podcast. Maybe because podcast is the trendy thing to do, I guess, these days. But a lot of people have liked the video, the audio, and they want to download it. And they want to use. A lot of people have been saying like they've really enjoyed. There's a guy tweeting the other day. He was like, I now enjoy this. Cleaning my house or washing the dishes or something. He was saying, I now clean my house, but instead of turning on the news, he turns on us.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's just 30 minutes, a short little thing to do while cleaning the kitchen or whatever. But I don't know why we call it a podcast. I don't. What else? Yeah,
it's just a live show. I don't even know.
I don't know either. Tomorrow I've got a weird day. We are traveling, so I'm probably going to be traveling around 1 or 2 o'clock. So we could either do this in the morning or do another nighttime one if you want.
Tomorrow is Friday.
Yeah.
I think we have to do nighttime. I think my son turns 1 tomorrow.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. So, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. My parents and my wife's parents are in town.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of a party thing in the morning, I think. I don't even know what time this is going on, but because I have to work, but I got to do that too.
Yeah.
So
it is a holiday weekend. I assume Monday we won't be doing one.
Yeah, we'll skip Monday.
Yeah.
If you're free tomorrow night,
I could pull it off tomorrow night, I think.
Slide a show in if you can.
I'll be at my in-laws. It'll be very different. I'll have to find a spot on their dining room table or something.
Well, if we only can, 15 minutes would be fine too.
Okay,
let's just not break the chain.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. Okay, cool.
Even 5 minutes if we have to. Just something to keep it going.
That's right.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Cool. Bye, guys. Thanks.